Good afternoon. Today our lecture is dedicated to the future of the environment and sustainable development. I am Sergey Bobylev, head of the Department of Economics and Environmental Management of Lomonosov Moscow State University, professor, doctor of economics and UN expert, which we will also talk about a little more. At the very beginning of my lecture, I would like to recommend a report that was posted on the UN website only 3 weeks ago. This report was prepared by an independent group of 15 scientists. I was also among the 15 people who were personally invited by the UN Secretary-General, and with a very important title, it seems to me, when we discuss the problem of the future. So, the Global Report on Sustainable Development, a time of crisis, a time of change in science to accelerate the transformation of the transition to sustainable development. On this slide you can see two versions of the cover of our report. The left cover became the cover of this official report. You can see her. She is quite optimistic. And here is the right cover, which, by the way, I voted for when the vote was held among the authors. The clock that is ticking and which is coming up, you can already see the hand at 12 o'clock. They show that there is not much time left to solve the problems of the future, global problems, including environmental problems. And that's why on this slide, you can see the wonderful words of the UN Secretary-General when he spoke about our report, that our report shows the right direction for the transition to sustainable development. But now we must talk about practice, about the implementation of those wonderful scientific ideas that we present in our report, for their practical implementation. And that's how to do it, how to ensure our future. This is, in my opinion, a very big problem, which we will talk about today. First of all, from the positions of environmental positions, economic positions. But in general, this is, of course, from the perspective of sustainable development. And so, in the last 30 years, before our eyes, humanity has made a huge leap towards prosperity. Over the past almost 30 years, the global gross domestic product has increased almost 5 times, and the lives of hundreds of millions of people have improved. It is enough to cite the example of China, where now over 400 million people belong to the middle class. In other words, this is a fantastic leap of humanity towards prosperity. But at the same time, quite sad things happened when we talk about the environment and ecology. Let's take a look at this slide. You can see on this slide, especially in recent years, these processes have accelerated, a sharp aggravation of global environmental problems, climate, desertification, deforestation, shortage of raw materials, shortage of fresh water, disappearance of biodiversity of various species of animals and plants, acid rain and so on. That is, a whole range of problems has sharply worsened, and as a result it turned out that humanity has achieved such a clear increase in material well-being, when we talk about financial indicators, based on the degradation of nature in the world. The climate agenda is very important. In my opinion, the nearest global problem for humanity is the problem associated with the shortage of clean drinking water. We have lived through the times of COVID, and now I hope it will not happen that in some form this time will return. One of the main problems of COVID is how to prevent COVID, washing your hands. But almost 3 billion people do not have enough water for their primary needs. What's there to wash your hands? Here, so to speak, there would be enough water to drink for primary needs. And so the fast-moving problem of worsening water scarcity, by the way, is spurred on by the climate, desertification and deforestation. In my opinion, there will really be a problem that will affect hundreds of millions of people. And as a result, on this slide you can see indicators of the aggravation of environmental problems, the problems that humanity has faced. You see, if you and I want to live like in a Hollywood movie, the consumption standards of the average American, then we all needed 5 planets like Earth. There is such an indicator as the ecological footprint. So, humanity is already eating up the entire annual biological potential in August. A very important indicator is associated with an increase in global temperature. Probably, Almost all of you have heard about the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. We will talk about it a little bit. The critical threshold for humanity is an increase in global temperature by 1.5 degrees, well, a maximum of 2 degrees. The trends that have developed now, the inertial trends in the development of the global economy of mankind as a whole, can lead to an increase in global temperature by 3 to 5 degrees. And the last indicator, which was recently published in the journal Nature, an international team of scientists has identified 8 boundaries of the stability of the biosphere of our Earth. These are the most complex physical cycles, biochemical, ozone, and so on. It turned out that we have already crossed 7 out of 8 boundaries of stability. That is, when we talk about the future of humanity, these environmental threats, environmental challenges for humanity for the future become, in my opinion, the most important. On this slide we see a map of global warming in the world. It is often said that, generally speaking, the northern countries, including Russia, will not suffer much from global warming. But pay attention to this map. Here is such a bright burgundy color. These are our northern regions, the Arctic and our agricultural regions. You see this strip, the main sap of Russia. That is, the whole world will suffer, and generally speaking, including Russia. So for Russia, the climate problem is also a problem of the future, and not the most pleasant one. Recently, a lot of economic terms have appeared that are just related to the environment, to our future. I think it's the most popular term in the world right now. When we talk about business, about the economy, this is ESG, environment and social governance. That is, we are talking about ecology, about society and about governance under management. They often mean corporate governance, that is, first of all, business. And this word becomes the most important. You can see on this slide highlighted as the main word of the WEF is the World Economic Forum, World Economic Forum. And this word is that how to help the economy, how to change the economy, how to make an environmental problem mitigated in terms of its impact on our future becomes the number one problem. I am trying to avoid approaches, environmental problems, environmental alarmism, calls to minimize the economy, back to nature. I want to show you this table from the report for the World Economic Forum in January this year. This report highlights 5 risks for the global economy, for humanity and in general risks for the future. These are economic risks, blue, environmental risks, green, the first ones, deep yellow, these are geopolitical, social, red and purple, technological risks. There is a forecast for the next 2 years. As you can see, we also have social problems here, problems arise, geoeconomic confrontations. But pay attention to what economists think. Again, I emphasize, the World Economic Forum, Nobel laureates, billionaires, heads of government, heads of banks, prime ministers. That is, they are the pragmatic economic elite of the world. And so, as can be seen from this report, 6 risks are environmental risks. Of these, the first 4 risks to humanity for the global economy are green. These are environmental risks, climate, destruction and disappearance, erosion of biodiversity, loss of ecosystems, and so on. In other words, economists have started speaking environmental language from the point of view of the future. And it seems to me that this is a very important sign of such a global change in economic thinking and, probably, an approach to the future. By the way, in this picture you can see such a process of changing economic thinking 10 years ago, 2012. The 2 most acute problems, 2 global risks, are economic. Well, greenhouse gases are in 3rd place. Then we have technological risks, social risks, and look at how the risks for humanity and the economy are greening. And so, in my opinion, this is an extremely important trend. In my opinion, Over the past 3 to 4 years, I would like to discuss problems. Many of them have arisen quite recently, or they have arisen a long time ago, but they have received their clear interpretation, axiomatics, documentation quite recently. Take a look at this slide. I spoke about ESG as one of the most important business development trends. Please note that there is a very strong thesis in the materials of the Global Economic Forum: traditional capitalism must change. This is the model of the traditional market that we have built, which should change, as you can see, to stakeholder capitalism, that is, to such a model of capitalism of all stakeholders. And so the goal of this new model is not to maximize wealth, but just here you see sustainable value creation, that is, the company's performance should be evaluated not only by shareholder returns, but also by achieving environmental and social management goals. That is, again, this is also a very important quote. When we talk about the World Economic Forum, about an attempt at change thinking, the following is a very eloquent quote: "The task of previous generations of capitalists is to preserve and increase capital. The task of the modern generation of capitalists is to save the planet." That is, it would also seem quite like 5 to 10 years ago, some such humanitarian appeals were not very clear, rather they were somewhat idealistic. Again, I emphasize, I am quoting the documents and approaches of the World Economic Forum. And such a change of mindset, there are many explanations. Here I like this picture from Hermann Foer, one of the classics of ecological economics, that we lived in an empty world until the 70s and we did not think about these new problems. It was empty world. You see the picture on the left, an aquarium, a lot of fish, a lot of biodiversity, one boat there. And suddenly we found ourselves in the full world. In this full world, where actually, speaking of biodiversity, there are few living creatures left, the economy is pressing everything. This is the number of ships in our aquarium, and this is a completely new world that requires a new ideology, new approaches. And so, in fact, we are talking about a new ideology of future development. And this ideology of future development should in many ways take into account sustainable development, which we will now talk about, and the very new paradigm, how to say, taking into account the environmental fact. I am quoting the UN documents to you again. That is, again, these are not documents of such radical green organizations. We may be the last generation that had a chance to save our planet. I took this from the 2015 UN report. There is a very, I would say, snide phrase by the Polish satirist Les: "You can't expect mercy from nature after what we did to her." Unfortunately, this picture shows what man has done to nature. But, generally speaking, the question is how far this process has gone and how much it can be changed. I highly recommend that our listeners read the UN report Global Human Development Report 2020 Global Human Development Report 2020. It is available in 6 main UN languages, including Russian. You see the next frontier of human development, the Anthropocene, and so, in my opinion, this report presents an important ideology of the future, that humanity is entering a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene, or the epoch of mankind. And so, in my opinion, this is a very important development of the ideas of our great compatriot Vernadsky, who almost 100 years ago put forward the concept of the noosphere, the sphere of the human mind, as such a global geological force that changes our biosphere. And so the awareness of this epoch of the Anthropocene, of humanity as the main, I would say, stone that hangs around the neck of the earth with all such negative consequences, is very important. And the last quote on this slide is very important, that the time for change, it's not about who will survive, people or trees. And in this report it is written, either no one will survive, or we will survive together. And this is a very important realization, either no one, or together, we or nature. In my opinion, this is such a challenge for the future, and at the same time a clear understanding of the future, how we should enter this future. Speaking of those shortcomings, we can name the civilizational model, the economic model of humanity. We can identify at least, as you can see, 4 such shortcomings: the underestimation of the poorest segments of the population, the growing gap between poor and rich countries, the short-term time horizon for decision-making, and the increase in environmental degradation, which we discussed above. And now, in my opinion, it is very important to reconsider the existing meanings and values for the future. The future that we are striving to build, in my opinion, should be based on absolutely new values. That is, we should not talk about material well-being. I call it the civilization of maximization. We maximize 3 results. What is the right development from the point of view of the past? Maximizing financial results, income, GDP, maximizing production, maximizing consumption. How good is this for the future? In my opinion, generally speaking, this civilization of maximization is very dangerous for the future. There is such a sad aphorism: when we say that there is no price, then if something has no price, then it does not exist for making economic decisions. And this is a very sad conclusion for the traditional economy, for the traditional decision-making process. But what about health? And what about nature? We very often do not include these 2 most important components in the decision-making process, and as a result we make wrong decisions that have a very negative impact on the future. I have such a favorite book. I also recommend watching it. Again, this is a book by economists. 2 Nobel laureates in economics. Stiglitz wrote a book, Misjudging Our Lives, Why GDP Doesn't Make Sense. This is the most important concept, in my opinion, for the future: misjudging our lives. The book contains a crisis that we do not know how to correctly assess development, progress, and enter the future without having the right measurement. It is very dangerous. And therefore, the very thesis that we need new meanings, new values, new economic models, in my opinion, is quite obvious. In the last 3 to 4 years, a phenomenon has occurred that can be called a change or radical transformation of the vision of the future for the global economy and the economies of all leading countries of the world. And virtually all long-term social and economic strategies are connected with this change. And here we are faced with such problems that even 5 to 7 years ago seemed to be some such absurd problems that are far from real life, which are associated with quite such abstract concepts. In the 2020 to 2021s, almost all the leading economies of the world declared their goals of achieving carbon neutrality, achieving a zero balance of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 to 2060. Again, if we go outside, if we even go to our universities and start asking students, what is carbon neutrality for you, carbon zero? I don't think we'll get a clear answer. But in fact, as you can see, all the leading this carbon neutrality has received its digital expression. It turned out that the goal of mankind is 1.5 degrees Celsius, that is, the global temperature should not increase above 1.5 degrees. This, again, is a rather paradoxical result. If 5 to 7 years ago someone said that suddenly humanity had found carbon zero and some 1.5 degrees as its goal, then, I think, it would have caused nothing but such surprise. But now it is an absolutely real vision of the future, which is embodied in the documents. And this means that environmental and climatic parameters are becoming more important than traditional economic ones. We have only a very narrow ecological corridor, and in this corridor we must solve the problems of the future. I think all of you already have an idea of the sustainable development that we must come to, which should determine the corridor of choice of opportunities and solutions for the future. That's when they ask us, what kind of future do you see? And what is the future for humanity for your countries? Well, Paradoxically, it will not turn out. It will turn out that humanity has at least formulated its future in the 21st century. This future is connected with the concept of sustainable development, or in English, sustainable development. This future is the consensus paradigm of human development in the 21st century. In my opinion, there are three important documents that define our future, and where it is written that sustainable development is the main paradigm for humanity in the 21st century. You can see on this slide, this is Rio 2012, this is New York 2015. You see, this is the Sustainable Development Agenda, these are the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Paris Climate Agreement December, Paris 2015. And it is precisely these documents, in my opinion, that have formulated the future of humanity as it should be, and they are quite clearly defined, about this narrow ecological corridor. I will not consider a formal definition of the future. You see, there was such a Brundtland Commission, which was created on behalf of the United Nations. The shortest definition of sustainable development is one that meets the needs of the present or present generations, but does not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. We can say that this is a kind of definition of a generational compromise. We should strive to live so well, or in other terms, to ensure our own well-being, so as not to infringe on the opportunities of the next generations. But I really like this, in my opinion, a vivid definition of sustainable development here. By the way, it is often cited in textbooks of sustainable development of the 19th century, the leader of one of the Indian tribes, which means the territory of America. He gathered his tribesmen and said, in my opinion, an absolutely brilliant phrase, "We did not receive our land from our fathers and grandfathers. We borrowed it from our children and grandchildren." Here is an absolutely brilliant definition. Here is the awareness of the future from the perspective of the modern generation, that we have taken what we have, nature, technology, our capabilities, as a kind of duty to the future. Very often, when trying to define sustainable development, they say that this is such a chair or stool on three legs. One leg is the economy, the other leg is society, the third leg is nature. And these three legs are for humanity to sit steadily in the future. These three legs should be equivalent, that is, sustainable development is the balanced development of all three components of the sustainability of the economy, society and nature. In this picture, we see the left picture. This is a kind of ideal of sustainable development. You see the economic aspects of sustainable development, socio-ecological. Sustainable development is located at the place where they intersect. Unfortunately, humanity, and indeed all economies, most of the economies of the world, have formed such a model of rather anti-sustainable development, which can be correlated, compared with the right picture. You will see a huge economy, maximizing financial results, production, consumption, very little social accounting and a very small circle of environmental aspects. Therefore, the minimal figure at the intersection of these three circles reflects this figure, the place of sustainable development for the future of mankind, but rather this figure shows that the anti-stability of modern development when there is no balance of these three components of sustainability. A very important point that has also arisen in almost the last 3 to 4 years. We were inundated with new terms related to the new name of the economy, green economy, digital economy, innovative economy, post-industrial economy, industry 4.0 and so on. In my opinion, here is a very important provision in the UN documents of 2012. It is possible to achieve sustainable development only on the basis of the right economy. And this is the right economy. It should be a green economy. That is, we have already talked with you that we have a very narrow corridor to the future. This is a narrow ecological corridor, and in order to fit into it, of course, we need a green economy. And now there is a very large complex or range of its various modifications. The low-carbon economy that we talked about is the most discussed in the world, that is, as a bright future for humanity, the global economy, the 2050s-2060s. There is a lot of talk about bioeconomy, the closed-loop economy. The blue economy has appeared. It is the economy of the seas, oceans and coastal territories. By the way, Russia should form a blue economy in this regard. The problem of the blue economy may become more acute for Russia than for other countries. The Arctic and the Far East are huge territories, a huge attraction. How to establish this balance between the extraction of energy resources, the development of tourism, cities, transport infrastructure, the cleanliness of the seas and oceans, fishing and so on. So the blue economy is also a major problem. It seems to me that this is one such example of how humanity should move into the future to a new economic model. This slide shows a very interesting example of China, as an attempt to shape a new future, taking into account our environmental component. China has scored a lot of environmental bumps in achieving a fantastic economic breakthrough, in achieving a sharp level of improvement in the lives of a huge number of the population. As I said, over 400 million is already the middle class. And no, China has officially written building an ecological civilization into the 2018 constitution. It seems to me that this is a wonderful example for humanity, and humanity should proclaim this future as the building of an ecological civilization. In my opinion, this is a very bright, accessible and necessary image of the future. And this picture shows how China is going to move on to this future. You see this structure of the energy balance. Now there is a huge proportion of coal that affects the environment, health, and the climate system, and you see a minimum rectangle of black coal in the future, by 2050, and a huge sector of the low-carbon economy, renewable energy sources. Wind, solar, biomass, hydroelectric power plants. In my opinion, this is a clear vision of the future and a clear outline of the path to this future using the example of energy transformation. And in conclusion, I would like to cite the slide's Sustainable Development Goals as tools for realizing this future. Humanity has agreed that the future, or at least the prospects until the year 30, humanity should implement on the basis of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. 17 goals, each goal has its own objectives, there are over 160 of them, and each task has its own quantitative indicators. There is not only the truth, quantitative, but, in my opinion, this is the most important step of humanity in trying to digitize the future. That is, when we have a quantitative indicator of sustainable development. In my opinion, this is a very important attempt to digitize the future into the movement of such a target indicator. And I think after the 30th year, humanity will develop this concept of sustainable development goals. How many of them will there be? What indicators? But this approach to the future in terms of sustainable development goals, I think, will. Thank you.